panel with us as well this morning. We will first hear from Minister Wiebes, followed by Dr. Birol, and then a short presentation of the findings of this report. After that, we'll have a Q&A session for the media. Thank you very much, Minister Wiebes. The floor is yours. Thank you. I think you're still on mute, please.
It's difficult to unmute.
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, for me, this is a valuable and memorable event. Obviously, I speak to a lot of people about energy and climate, and many have opinions, convictions, ideologies, worries. They have calls for action, or they have complaints. But it is not every day that we can have a discussion with somebody that has studied the facts, modeled its consequences, compared options, and has come to fact-based conclusions. So, dear Dr. Birol, good to see you again. Very welcome. I think it is important, in order to gain support in society, that the energy transition has to take place at the lowest societal costs. And using the knowledge of the International Energy Agency and its recommendations will help us achieve exactly that. In our government coalition agreement that we formulated 3 years ago, we aimed for a European commitment for the ambition of 55% in the Union. And we lobbied very hard to achieve that. And I'm very pleased that the Commission has presented their climate target plan with an emission reduction target of exactly that 55% or even more. And I hope that the German presidency can conclude the discussion on this reduction target in the EU before the end of this year. And each country will have to contribute to this. Now, I'm curious to hear how the International Energy Agency views the Dutch approach and what we can do to improve that. Dr. Birol, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, first of all, for your time being with us. And thank you very much for your kind words. Dear colleagues, at the IEA, among other things, what we do is that every 5 years, we review the energy policies of our member countries from A to Z. And this is done by a group of experts from different countries around the world. And they talk with the different stakeholders and come up with some recommendations and suggestions and criticism, if necessary, for the governments. In the case of Netherlands, the review was led by the Madam Ambassador Mary Warlick of the United States, and there were high-level experts, energy experts from Belgium, Denmark, Japan, Portugal, Lithuania, Sweden, European Commission, OECD, and others. Of course, the IEA experts were also involved. I would like to thank the Dutch government, particularly Minister of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy, for the excellent cooperation throughout this 1-year process. During the review, the team talked with the several energy stakeholders, not only with the ministry that we are talking today, but also from other ministries, regulators, energy companies, associations, NGOs, consumer groups, system operators, with everybody. And we came up with this report. Now, I would like to thank the Netherlands, of course, all the support they give to IEA. So I should also mention this in the beginning. And Mr. Minister, always your great dynamic intervention in our meetings. And I would like to also thank as a energy person for being a leader in the global clean energy transitions. And I know very well what kind of a leading role you played, Mr. Minister, in the European debate in terms of setting ambitious targets, which is definitely source of inspiration for many countries. I also want to thank Netherlands for helping us, especially in our work with Africa. We are working very closely with sub-Saharan African countries. Many thanks to Dutch government for that. Now, Netherlands is a important country, but even Netherlands is affected from what is happening in the world. So therefore, I thought I could give you a very brief description how we see the global energy world now under COVID. We follow day by day the numbers here. How do we see it, and to put the Dutch situation in a context. Now, when we look at the global context today, we see that the global GDP is set to decline about 5% this year. This is the largest economic crisis we had since decades. And as I said, always, we will hear a lot the word of unemployment. Unemployment will be a major issue, and as of mid this year, 400 million people lost their jobs, and we expect this can, throughout the year, can go much higher. This is globally. When we look at the energy sector, first of all, I believe, Mr. Minister, during the confinement period, we all understood how essential the energy and energy security is for all of us. Thanks to electricity, we were able to communicate, have call our families. They have this working from home. Hospitals could work without any problem, carry out their services. So the energy critical importance for our continuation of our life has been once again, I think, underlined during this period. But when we look at the energy sector, we also see that it is going through very difficult days, and we expect this year about 6 million energy jobs will be lost. And emissions. This year, global emissions will go down substantially, and this decline this year erases the increase of the emissions in the last 10 years. In 1 year, the decrease erases the increase of the last 10 years. But this doesn't happen as a result of the right energy policies, right environmental policies. This happens because of basically two reasons. One, health crisis. Second, economic crisis. And if we do not take the right measures, this may well, emissions may well rebound. Now, if I can look at the energy demand, to put in a context, this year energy demand, we look at day by day the energy demand around the world. The decline will be largest in the last 70 years. I mean, just if you want to take 2008, 2009, the financial crisis, this year's decline in energy demand is 7 times higher than the decline after the financial crisis. 7 times bigger decline this year. And this is, of course, to put it in the context, this is a major issue, because energy is also, as I said, the key driver of economic growth and our social lives. Now, emissions, again, big decline in emissions. Some of the colleagues are, we see, very happy that the emissions are down. We are also happy, but the issue is the following. With the economic rebound, hopefully we will see soon, if we don't change our policies, emissions will go up. For example, again, in the year 2009, after the financial crisis, emissions went down, but 2010, with the rebound of the global economy, emission increase was very strong, and still in the history, it was the largest increase in emissions ever, because economic rebound, not much change in the energy policies. So again, it is extremely important that we make use of this decline of the emissions and make sure that there is no rebound. And here, of course, the policy of the governments will be critical. Now, a few last points about the current situation we are in, how major effects it is on the energy sector. We look at the energy investments compared to last year. We see that in all energy sources, huge decline in energy investments, mainly in oil and gas, the big drop, 1/3, least on renewables. But all the energy investments are going down as a result of the this coronavirus and related issues, energy investments, and this is definitely troubling for the future, and it may have implications for our energy security and clean energy transition process. And this decline of 20% this year is the largest in the history. Now, this situation, what are we going to do? On one hand, we have an economy which is around the world, almost going from recession to recession. On the other hand, we want to have a clean energy future. What can we do? So what we have done is, IEA, together with IMF, we have prepared a 3-year plan, a sustainable recovery plan. So as IEA, we don't live in a different planet. We know that the climate change is important, but we also know that the governments want to boost their economic growth and create jobs. So therefore, we have developed a plan which will help to boost the economy, create jobs, and improve energy resilience and sustainability. We look at several energy policies that could be included in the recovery packages. Mainly energy efficiency, the house improvements, different energy efficiency in the building sector. In my view, energy efficiency is a job-creating machine. Second, further supporting the renewables, especially solar and wind. They are very helpful. And third, extending and strengthening the grids of the electricity power systems. So these three, especially these three policies, if they are injected in the recovery packages around the world, they will, as we have calculated, help to boost the economic growth, create additional jobs, and make sure that we don't see a rebound of the emissions. Now, many countries, and we were in touch throughout the process with the Mr. Vice President Timmermans and his team for the European Green Deal, as well as other countries from India to Canada, working with them on their recovery packages. Now, despite this situation, I want to finish here the global picture. I wanted to say that I am, even in this year, I am optimistic more than ever about our clean energy future. And I have 5 very brief reasons why I'm optimistic more than ever on a clean energy future. Number one, solar, the renewables are growing very strongly as they are becoming cheaper and cheaper. Solar is becoming the cheapest source of electricity generation in many parts of the world. And as IEA has 2 years ago rightly expected, offshore wind costs are going down as well. So leave aside the cleanliness or dirtiness, etc. Solar and wind are becoming cheaper. This is one reason being optimistic, and especially in the last 1.5 years, the decline, nose diving of the costs are really impressive. Second, Many of the clean energy technologies do require a significant amount of upfront investments. And then fuel is for free in many cases. And we know that many central banks addressing the problem of the economic problem we are facing today are coming up with ultra low interest rates. And this may well help those clean energy transition investments to get additional momentum there. And we believe this ultra low interest rates will be with us for an extended period. More and more governments are throwing their weight behind clean energy. It is Europe had make a major move here, led by several progressive countries, including Netherlands, but also other countries from Canada to South Africa, from South Africa to recently China. We are hearing that the government's coming up with, driven by different factors, they are putting their weight behind clean energy. Companies are stepping up. Oil and gas companies, they are increasing the share of their business portfolios in the clean energy projects. And this is very important because they have a lot of experience in terms of engineering, deep pockets and everything. They can help to make some of the technologies, bring them to the maturity, such as carbon capture, such as hydrogen, among others. And finally, we are seeing the innovation around the world is gathering steam, especially technologies such as hydrogen is getting a major boost around the world. So this is how we see the world, rather devastating impacts on the energy sector of COVID, in terms of the investments, in terms of the jobs, but we are seeing that there are reasons to be optimistic for the future as a result of economic dynamics and the government policies. And we would like to present you the Dutch in-depth review here. As I said, we do it all the time for each country every 5 years. And I am very happy that we are going to come up with now the Dutch in-depth review in this global context. And I should tell you that these in-depth reviews are run under the able leadership of my colleague, Mr. Art van Bohemen, who is one of the pillars of the IU. Thank you very much for lending us such an able Dutch civil servant, Mr. Minister. Now, before passing the floor to my colleague, who is in charge of this review, I have spotted the 5 major challenges for Mr. Minister in his daily life. And after looking at those challenges, I am very happy that I am in Paris and head of the IEA rather than working in the ministry. Big challenges. The first challenge, these are the framework conditions of the Netherlands. I mean, this is a legacy issue since years. The fossil fuels are today about 90% of the mix in Netherlands. And 2008, it was 92%. All these efforts push sincere goodwill was able to bring the share of fossil fuels from 92 to 90%. It is not for Netherlands, it is for the world as well. In the last 30 years, the share of fossil fuels didn't change at all. Fossil fuels are stubborn. And there are many reasons why they are stubborn, but this is a big challenge. So the job is rather challenging. Second, Groningen. This phase out of Groningen brings the import dependency of Netherlands at very high levels. In the year 2013, the import dependency of Netherlands was less than 30%, and today it is over 70%. And this is the energy import dependency. Energy security is another challenge. Emission reductions. Compared to 1990, there is a decline about 15%. Still important 15%, but in the recent years, the pace of the reductions slowed down, need a definite boost. So when I look at these three important data points, very, very difficult framework conditions to start with. But I know that Mr. Minister and the Dutch government is very ambitious, and we have seen this in the 2019 climate agreement, how to tackle these challenges, and not only tackle them, but in a way which doesn't have negative consequences for the economy. And we know that when it was done in 2019, we were not aware of the COVID crisis, and nobody was aware, in fact. So therefore, it puts everything in a different context. But COVID will hopefully will disappear soon, but the climate agreement, which provides a strategic response to the climate challenge, will be with us many years to come. So this is definitely a very important roadmap for Netherlands. And when I look at as a result of this climate agreement and other measures, Netherlands is pushing in many fronts to accelerate the clean energy transitions. I had the pleasure to discuss with Mr. Minister some time ago offshore wind, leadership here, a very strong policy framework, and to cut the cost, accelerate the deployment. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, because as I said 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, when we had the offshore wind report for the world, I expect offshore wind will catch up solar in the next years to come in terms of cost and soon on deployment. And thank you very much for your leadership here. The second, the electrification of transport, the huge push there from the government side. The EV charging network is only third to compare to China and the United States, more than any other country public charging stations. This is, of course, a huge success story for Netherlands. Third, again, a bold hydrogen strategy to having a target, be leadership in the terms of production. Congratulations for that, and I can perhaps congratulate you for the Mr. Noy van Hulst, the hydrogen envoy, and who is now nicknamed as Mr. Hydrogen in Europe. His great efforts to support your vision there, Mr. Minister. And finally, another very good example, and the last one I would like to give is the carbon capture and storage in the port of Rotterdam, the Portos. This is also a very well thought push for accelerating clean energy transitions. And all of these areas, the offshore wind, electric cars, the hydrogen, carbon capture and storage are exactly those type of buttons that one needs to push if one is serious to accelerate energy transitions. Now, I will now pass the floor to my colleague Peter to finish this, giving some more flavor on our Dutch in-depth review. Peter.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. The Netherlands has reworked its energy and climate policy to focus on GHG emission reductions and achieving a carbon neutral economy by 2050. As Dr. Birol noted, emissions are down 15% in 2018, but the Netherlands is embracing ambitious climate targets through the Climate Act, aiming for emissions to be down 49% by 2030 and 95% by 2050. The 2019 climate agreement is the core of the Netherlands' energy and climate policy. and it was developed through a collaborative process with over 100 stakeholders from across Dutch society, and it defines measures to support least cost emissions reductions. Also in line with this policy change, the Netherlands' main monetary support scheme, SDE+, a competitive auction process that awards market premiums for renewable energy projects, has been updated to SDE++, and now supports a wider range of technologies based on avoided CO2 emissions. Some of the largest emission reductions are expected to come from sector-specific measures. In the electricity sector, the government has developed a detailed policy framework for offshore wind, which designates pre-cleared development sites, defines a competitive auction process, and sets targets for 11.5 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2030. This framework has led to reduced risks for developers and significant cost reductions. Since 2018, all offshore wind auctions have been subsidy-free. Dutch law requires an end to coal-fired generation by 2030, and the Netherlands has been taking significant steps to reduce generation from coal. The government negotiated the closure of a coal-fired generation power plant in 2019 and is working on the closure of another plant, potentially by the end of 2021. Starting in 2021, the Netherlands will introduce a carbon levy on industrial emissions, which will be progressively increased to assist in achieving the 2030 targets. Industry will be provided monetary support through the SDE Plus scheme to help engage in emission reduction projects. As Dr. Birol noted, the Netherlands is making a strong push for decarbonization of transport with a focus on electric mobility. There are tax incentives and subsidies to support purchasing electric vehicles, and the Netherlands is a global leader in EV charging infrastructure. The Dutch EV charging network has the world's highest density of chargers per capita and is rapidly growing. There is also a strong focus on smart charging so that EVs can support flexible grid operations. To support a sustainable and secure gas transition, the Netherlands is aiming to reduce gas demand and decarbonize the gas supply. To reduce the significant gas demand in the building sector, the government has launched the Natural Gas-Free Neighborhood Program, which aims to convert 1.5 million homes from gas to low-carbon heating by 2030. In addition, in 2018, the requirement to connect to the gas network was changed to a ban on new gas connections. The Netherlands is also cooperating with Germany, Belgium, and France to reduce the regional demand for gas from Groningen. And under the Green Gas Roadmap, the Netherlands is supporting decarbonization of the gas supply through scaling up of biomethane production with a focus on grid injection. The significant Dutch hydrogen strategy aims to rapidly boost production and use of low-carbon hydrogen across the entire Dutch economy. This includes targets for 500 megawatts of electrolysis capacity by 2025 and 3 to 4 gigawatts of capacity by 2030. SDE++ supports low-carbon hydrogen production, both through electrolysis and also through carbon capture and storage. And in addition, the Netherlands has reworked its innovation and research programs to support the scale-up of commercial hydrogen projects. The Netherlands is already a notable industrial user of hydrogen, and there are several large-scale projects under development to produce hydrogen for industrial use, looking at offshore wind and at CCS. The IEA's energy policy review in the Netherlands contains 44 specific policy recommendations, which aim to assist the government in achieving its goals for emission reductions and the transition to a carbon neutral economy. The key recommendations are to the government: monitor potential security of supply issues resulting from the mid-2022 closure of the Groningen gas field and growing dependence on natural gas imports, with a focus on reducing demand, decarbonizing the gas supply, and repurposing gas infrastructure. The government should also ensure that energy policy supports strong development of digitalization in all sectors, clear regulations on energy sector data that support transparency, easy access, while also addressing issues of privacy and cybersecurity. Ensure that the 2019 climate agreement greenhouse gas emission reduction targets support cost-effective achievement of EU requirements, including targets for renewable energy and energy efficiency. Support early-stage development of emerging technologies that have the potential for cost-effective emissions reductions to stimulate mobilization of private funds and bridge the gap from demonstration to large-scale commercial development. Revise the regulatory framework of electricity markets to provide room for innovation and facilitate proactive development of an electricity system that can safely integrate increasing shares of variable renewable generation and support smart grid solutions. And finally, drive commercial scale low carbon hydrogen development in the near term by facilitating investment decisions and creating an adequate support scheme for scaling up electrolysis and carbon capture utilization and storage and the supporting infrastructure. Apologies for the error with the slides. In closing, I would like to offer my sincere thanks to the numerous people who contributed to the Netherlands Energy Policy Review. Thank you very much, Minister Wiebes, and the government staff and the energy sector stakeholders who supported the review process. And thanks also to the the team members of the review team, especially Madam Ambassador Mary Warlick, the team leader, and to the numerous staff at the IEA who contributed to this successful review. Thank you.
Many thanks, Peter. Many thanks, Dr. Birol. We're now going to be taking some questions. We'll take a short break while we get the questions. For members of the press, can you please use the Q&A box in the Zoom application to send us your questions, please. We'll take a very short break till we collate the questions, and then we will address those to Dr. Birol and to Mr. Minister. Thank you.
Minister doesn't need to respond to Minister wants to respond. They didn't give you the.
Sorry, apologies for that. Before we take the questions, of course, please send us a question, but we will hear from Minister Wiebes first to respond to the findings from the report. Mr. Minister, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I completely agree with Dr. Birol that it's very important to not just work on energy sustainability, but also combine it with economic recovery. That's an opportunity that we should all use wherever and whenever we can. I'm also happy with your optimism. I've seen you in less optimistic days, and I'm still considering whether I can completely share your optimism to the same level, but I'll let you know. But I also see the challenges. It is an enormous task, and in that light, I'm happy to see that the in-depth review at a certain point notices some progress. We're recognized as the world leader in smart charging infrastructure and electric transport. On a second point, we were never, as the Netherlands, we were never front runners in renewables. But the review notices an accelerated growth of the share of renewable energy in the total energy consumption in the Netherlands. We're rapidly growing to a much higher level. And I'm happy to hear that you think it is useful, our policy framework in developing offshore wind. There's also some recommendations that I think should be taken very seriously, and that we will look at. For example, one in our energy innovation policies. Innovation is key. Without innovation, we're nowhere, and we're helpless and lost. And in the Netherlands, we focus on different technology readiness levels. We have a strong collaboration between public and private partners. But encouraged by your advice, we will have to look into the gap between early stage development and large scale commercial deployment of technologies. We'll still have that gap, and I think you're right, we need to work on that. there's 3 recommendations that the review makes that I like to take the opportunity to mention, because they're directly relevant for our policies. It is tempting for all of us to exclude sources of energies or energy, or to exclude solutions. However, the International Energy Agency always stresses that we need a broad mix of energy sources and techniques to deliver on our ambition. We need to be open-minded. We are simply not in the position to beforehand exclude options such as CCS, such as geothermal energy, such as solar, also solar on land-based. Also onshore wind, we don't have the option to exclude it. We have no option to exclude biomass beforehand, and we have no logic to exclude nuclear. That is very important for our policies. No one likes all these sources, but we need them to get to this goal. The second one that I couldn't help noticing, that there is the International Energy Agency recommendation to consider a lifetime extension of our Borssele nuclear plant beyond 2033. We're currently analyzing how to do that and if that is technically possible. And the third one that I'm picking out, which is directly relevant for policy, is around the phase out of our Groningen gas field. Natural gas is still for the next decades an important source of energy. And the IEA raises concern regarding our security of gas supply, not just in the Netherlands, but basically also in Europe. And this has to have our utmost attention. And guaranteeing security of supply and reducing dependency of imports, in my view, would necessarily mean that we need to continue the production exploration of small gas fields in the Netherlands, only where production can be done completely safely. But where it is possible, we need to continue that. What I like is the fact-based analysis approach of the International Energy Agency. We need to base our decisions on the latest scientific doctrines, and this IDR and that also with other IEA reports helps us in that regard. Thank you, Dr. Birol, and your organization for this review.
I thank you very much, Minister Wiebes. And before going to the many questions we receive from the journalists, I can tell you that we do appreciate your government's open-minded approach to all clean energy technologies and having a very clinical perspective for all of them from the perspective of the Dutch citizens. Now, perhaps I can pass the floor to our Chief Communication Officer to ask the questions from the media. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Birol. So we have been getting quite a lot of questions, and in the interest of time, I might just pull them together and ask them first to Dr. Birol, and quite a number of questions for you, Mr. Minister. First question for Dr. Birol is if you could identify, you mentioned in your presentation some of the the strength of offshore wind potential for the Netherlands. And I will read the other questions to follow for the Minister. The first question, 2 questions really about hydrogen, one from Hans van der Lucht from Energia, talking about the bet that the Netherlands is making on hydrogen, that the review puts a lot of emphasis on green hydrogen, which the government wants to support. How do you assess the prospects of green hydrogen prospects? So 2 questions there for you, Mr. Minister. And another one, and 2 more, one on natural gas, from William Powell from Natural Gas Europe. Mr. Minister, can you envisage any circumstances in which Groningen will be brought back online? And the final question from Mr. Remco de Boer from FD News. The report recommends establishing a level playing field for nuclear energy. Could you elaborate on that? And how should the Dutch government establish this level playing field? So, Dr. Birol, if I could turn it to you first, please.
Thank you. So about offshore wind, now why we bet on offshore wind some 2 years ago that it may well be a mainstream technology in the next years to come, at least for 3 reasons. One, we have seen that there is a huge potential for cost reductions, because the technology was not there, and we saw there could be a lot of advancement technology in terms of the turbines, in terms of the platforms. This is number one. Number two, the quality of wind in terms of the duration of the wind and the speed of the wind is very impressive compared to onshore wind. The quality of the wind is the second one. And the third one is the very fact that some of the onshore wind, or in general energy installments in the land, is facing public opposition, and offshore wind is definitely not affected from that. But this is not enough to be successful. You need governments. You need governments all the time, of course, but especially here in the Dutch example, why do you need, why was successful, why there's a promising in Netherlands? Government in Netherlands does the preparatory work on sites and ensures connections to grid. This is very important, and we think that this would reduce the investment risk substantially, and offshore wind can now build, if I am not wrong, without subsidies. This is definitely a very good success story that Netherlands can be happy about. I would stop here.
Many thanks, Dr. Birol. Then the questions for you, Mr. Minister, about hydrogen.
Yeah, I understand that the worry is around the subsidy possibilities of hydrogen in the Netherlands. Is that right? We have an auction-oriented subsidy program called the SDE, and hydrogen is now included in that subsidy framework. But in essence, if you would look at it with a fresh mind, then this is not the right, in principle, not the right subsidy for this technology, because it is not market ready if you look at the cost numbers. Nevertheless, we wanted to position hydrogen in this subsidy. There are other ways to scale up and promote hydrogen, but we wanted to have it facilitate it in this particular subsidy. But obviously, we are we have to conform to the state aid rules of the European Union. And if we produce hydrogen with primarily non-green energy, then it is obviously there is a risk of state aid. So within the rules of the European Commission, we made it a smaller start with the promotion of hydrogen in this particular framework. But let me stress that if this is not and should not be the only way of the Dutch government to promote hydrogen. Should I continue with the other questions, or do you want to do that separate? There is a Groningen question on the gas field. Yeah.
Thank you.
There is the question, will we ever reopen Groningen? Well, let me be very clear about that. No. We produce gas where it is safe, and that is no longer the case in Groningen, and safety is first. So no, the Groningen field will not be open. Then there is a question, I understand that the question is about a level playing field of nuclear energy versus the other energy producing technologies. Well, let me say we're in the beginning of a sort of growing support of nuclear in the Netherlands. Our parliament is now in majority in favor of looking at what it takes if we would promote nuclear energy in the future energy mix. And future is definitely after 2030, if you look at the throughput times, but there is a growing support. And our first step is really to, with some precision, make clear what it takes in terms of investment programs, in terms of stimulus, in terms of spatial reservations. So that is our first step. And obviously, as we all know, the Netherlands, this will fly if there is sufficient support in politics, but also in society. My personal expectation is that when things become more clear, then the support will continue to grow. But it is too early to make clear in what way we will exactly make sure that nuclear energy deserves a place in the mix. And obviously, a level playing field on that level, it makes sense, that is logical. But the way how we do that is that's still in the future.
Many thanks. Dr. Birol, perhaps is there anything you want to add on this?
On nuclear, yes. In fact, when I heard that in the Netherlands there is a momentum, if I may say so, as Minister Wiebe said, for the nuclear, I was very happy to see that, because you cannot, on one hand, push the electrify the mobility transportation system, cut gas, push renewables, and leave it there. Because when I look at the Netherlands, but I see that electricity is future in Netherlands energy future. Electricity is the future of Netherlands, and electricity you cannot get only from offshore wind and solar. In addition to that, in order to support the resilience of the system and provide flexibility to the power system, I think nuclear can play a very positive role, as it plays here where we live in France, 75% coming from nuclear power. And we are very comfortable, except for COVID, of course. But there is it's a nice surprise once again from Netherlands that there is a consideration of looking at the future of nuclear power. We at the IEA, we look at all clean energies. We do not favor one to another, because I know that some people love this technology, but they don't love the other clean energy technology. We think our issue is not to increase our egos, but to reduce the emissions. So therefore, we are happy to look at all clean energy technology. And I want to congratulate the Dutch government once again to look at all these options on the table in an open-minded way. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Dr. Birol. This is, we still have quite a few questions, but we're running out of time. So perhaps I can just turn it to you for concluding remarks. But thank you very much for this. We encourage members of the press to just send us the questions at press@iea.org, and we will make our best to answer. Dr. Birol.
So thank you very much, Minister Wiebe, for this full 1 hour you have devoted to IEA, and I am sure from Ambassador Mary Warlick, the head of this delegation, to my colleagues who work on this report throughout the 1 year, they feel very privileged to hear your views, your reaction to our report. And we are very happy that you have positively reacted to our report, and we hope that our report will be of use to you and to your colleagues in terms of our recommendations and friendly reminders, and some maybe here and there, some critics. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention, Mr. Wiebe.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.